Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm doing this video to kind of relay a message on how this ascension process is working with the electromagnetic fields of our star and the Earth, and giving you an explanation of kind of what I learned across all the faiths. So, what we're actually inside of is like the infinite all, the logos, the Holy Spirit. All these different religions identify this divine intelligence, but the way to think of it is it's like the information for everything. So as soon as the original thought occurs, boom, the information for everything comes into being, kind of like the surface of this DVD, where you can see the information for the movie, but you can't see the movie. And then it's not just one movie, it's a bunch. So that's sort of like all these timelines that you hear people talking about, because you have this Mandela effect that you hear everyone talking about. And I'll explain how this is all working. So the moment that information cloud comes into being, the theater of the present moment begins, and what it's a reflection of is a learning loop where everything is compacted into cycles and you're like a fractal fragment of it. So it shares self-similarity at all levels, so you can look at yourself to have understanding of it, because it brought you up into being and you're in a dynamic with it. So there's a field of intelligence that's non-local to you that you can decipher through your biology. And then the nervous system and the gates of the body, which is the torsion field flow. That's the ascension process that we're talking about. And then what your biology is also contained in the religions. Everything's actually in there. It's just the way that it's organized, it has to be deciphered. It's not available to you without austerity. You have to be austere in how you do your work in order to attenuate yourself to the fields that they're talking about in there, because it's a giant intelligence pattern manifest that's organized in octaves, and it's a whole that actually is stationary and fluctuating in its own singularity dimension, so to speak. And we're experiencing it as movement, and that's reflective of in the theater of the present moment, because you can see there's a logical sequence, and that's like a self-learning loop. So the creator brings up all of this into being as fields of potential, and then it works itself out by following pathways and patterns, and then each little universe is governed by learning, and then the detail part is infinite. So there's all these infinite variations in detail, but the core learning, the cellular development, is the finite part, and that would be what we call the path of souls. And when we're talking about this ascension process, we're talking about our position in space. So the way to think about it is that if you were to travel back billions of years, there would be a pattern that all the stuff in the galaxy has followed as it's orbiting around itself. And as that process were to, if you were to retrograde it or reverse it back to the beginning, you would be able to then say, there we are in space. So there we are in time. And then everything that we're looking at is sort of a reflection of the growth and development of the universe. And then that's done as like a fractal of you. So you go through growth phases, and then the galaxy goes through growth phases. So the first growth phase is the infancy stage, and that's where the matter's working itself out to bring up, a physical reality and planets and all these different things. And then those processes then go into the toddler phase, and it brings up life and self-awareness. And then the nature of that cycle is the beginning. So it's like that's where the ancients lie, and that would be your angelic benevolent races, because by the template of the logos, they come up into being and they do their work and they see themselves in a high degree of unity, because it's like a toddler, so it's easy to see everything all as one. And they do their work from that perspective, and they become grand, and they build massive technological wonders that seem like magic to us, and they leave all of that behind, and they transcend the physical plane that we're existing in to higher densities and dimensions as a reflection of how they're doing their work in the present moment. And then their philosophy of unity their perception is how they see the creation, but you're in a dynamic with it. So, from others' perspective, that's not how things are, because they lack the biological capacity in the cellular fields to be able to perceive the creation that way. And then that would be the aim and intent of what Ascension is to bring yourself up to a level of beingness where you can understand what the creation is. And then it's following service to others, cleanliness of actions, and devotional service. And then you're in devotional service by how you do your work. So the things you think about, the things you talk about, the things you eat, right? It all matters because you're a biological processing unit that is like capable of deciphering all these high density intelligence patterns or fields or octaves, right? And they're coming through you, through your consciousness and your feelings, the heart, the gut. That's what it's about. There's neurological centers in your gut, there's neurological centers in your heart, and then your brain, left and right hemispheres, masculine, feminine. When you balance that out, then you have a whole brain that you become capacious in your ability to transceive these fields and understand. So then what's going on with the stars, we're traveling through space, and the space itself is influencing how these fields of information that are manifesting our physical reality are flowing, and then we are brought up into being by them. And basically matter and reality organizes around the thoughts and feelings, right? And that there's a larger aim and intent for Creator, and that is to bring you into grand states of beingness and loving service. Or there is the opposite path, right? And then that's what we're experiencing on Earth. So that's what's going on with this ascension process, is the light is a carrier of information to the DNA. And then the reason why it's so special in our system is because we're going through an evolutionary hypercycle where our star is transmitting like 1 billion years of evolutionary information in a 25,000 year cycle. And then otherworldly beings are here having an experiment, and they are on Earth, but they use technologies to sort of protect themselves from this influence because it would be changing them as well. So we're the surface experiment, and we're being bombarded with this light, and then our genetics is a very sacred genetics that was aggregated by a genetic farmer race that was authorized to do this, to bring about a bunch of ancient genetics from, it would be like the childhood phase of the galactic life cycle. And what we would be by our nature is like the Gelflings, you know, from the Dark Crystal, where we're like these forest beings that are like these angelic, loving, really kind beings that are really orientated towards service to others modalities. And then the reason why we have that innocence is we're new. So when you create a new species, it has to do its learning and growth. And then that like feed back into the non-local mind, the cloud that everyone's a part of, right? And then because we're created at the behest of these other beings that would be considered angelic, right? We're being influenced into service to others modalities, and we're operating in a feminine dominant civilization that was sort of like the way the Native Americans on Cuba were living when they were found by Columbus. There was no weapons, and it was a rather gentle, loving, cooperative civilization that didn't have a concept for all these brutal modalities. And that's where we were around 55,000 years ago. And then Manus, they're the fallen guardians. They came from Mars after an epic fall. And I can talk about that later, but that's not really that important. But it is important to how we came to be, because we were a benevolent ascension experiment that was hijacked by fallen guardians. And then they took a feminine dominant group, and over a 30,000 year process, and 2 cycles before, they reorged it into a masculine dominant group, and they took all of their knowledge about the ascension, about the nature of the creation, because they were given the transcendental knowledge or Islam, that's what it is, from Ra group, and they are the archangels, Vivaswan, the ancients, and their high density angelic consciousness that lives on Venus. And they relayed their sacred knowledge to Manus, and it spurred a golden era, but that collapsed. And then in their final moves, they crash landed this benevolent ascension experiment and hijacked it. And then they inserted their chosen one. And that's where you have Jesus, that's the newborn soul of Ra group that was passage through time on that vessel, Oumuamua. And that's the experiment. So we're this high-powered genetics that's prone to this ascension process because of the chakras we have. So our biology has the ability to mirror and reflect creator consciousness. But in order to activate it, you have to do your work in service to others' modalities, but then there's the dark side that cheats it, right? So that's why you have this malevolent force and all these AIs on Earth, because they have their genetics into this experiment, because it was crash landed by fallen guardians, and then the enemies of the fallen guardians followed them here, right? So that's sort of what you're experiencing right now in your present moment with all of this crazy stuff that's happening around you. Is the reason why is because you're actually in the most advanced star system in the galaxy. You have the most advanced genetics that's been created. Something like us isn't supposed to exist at this point in the cycle. And we're being bombarded by this evolutionary hypercycle. So all this insane light's coming into us. We're being activated by it because it's part of what the experiment's aim and intent is. And then there's an ancient crystal built by the archangels Ra or Vivaswan that's down inside the earth at a technological power center that's referred to as the Garden of Eden. And basically that crystal's like a glow stick, but it was a part of 3 crystals that were here, and it made a network. But that all fell apart because of fallen guardians and their hoax Atlantis. And their chosen one opened a portal to the dark dimension at the power center, and that led in the waveform that would be considered satanic, and it infected the group. That's the Archons and the Jinn. The race that was infected directly was called the Jedi. That's the fall of the Republic from Star Wars. So all of it intertwines, because predictive programming, soft disclosure, is what your science fiction actually is in urban mythology, because you're an experiment. So there's this consciousness factor they have to account for in order to get you to work. You have, it will have a dissonance if we're not being saturated in all these themes and told the truth. But then there's an agreement that we're making on a cellular level, because the truth is too scary, that we're all going to pretend like we don't know what's actually going on here. But everybody does if they actually do the self-work to get deep inside. They'll find their fears and their aversions and their attachments, and then it'll be a reflection of all of these previous sort of spiritual things, because your DNA is like an antenna, and it's getting a broadcast from a non-local mind, and you're drawing your consciousness into it, and it's based on the past learning, and the creator has an aim and intent, and basically reality organizes around it, and that's what reincarnation is, right? And then at the beginning, the creator has nothing else to create from other than itself. So creator creates from itself, and then we cycle and we reincarnate. And the way to understand like the soul is the relays about Allah's lamp, where there's a single light, a master light, and it's shining out, and then all these other sublights are reflecting back. And then Indra's web is the same thing. So it's a spider web covered with dewdrops, and then in every dewdrop is a reflection of the one, and in the one is a reflection of every dewdrop. So what they're talking about is a holographic mirroring principle, and then you're in that holographic mirroring principle with Creator. The Creator is intelligent and infinite, and then what do you possess that is intelligent and infinite? And that is your imagination. So your imagination is your mental imaging system, and then it's hardwired and connected to everything else, and you have a pineal gland, and that's sort of like the laser that reads the data from the cloud. And it allows you to access these higher density intelligences that are like octaves above you, And then that information about how to activate your biology is being broadcast through your star system because of the nature of the space we're going through. So where we are in space is where we are in time. So you go back 800,000 years, and you could be with Manus on the asteroid belt, which was a planet called Tiamat, and you could be looking forward up at to this time period and saying, well, that's where we're going to be in space, and we know that that's a disaster zone, and that the light cycle that we're going to be in isn't going to be copacetic to our own biology, and we're going to be facing this disaster cycle. So we need to do things now to be prepared for that, right? And it's like a position in space and time, because everything that's happening in the present moment is a reflection of where you are in time, which is also where you are in space, which is the position of where you are in the cycle on this giant cloud that's a dynamic that you're in. And everything's literal. You're a literal expression out of this cosmic consciousness, and then you're being upgraded right now by the light that's coming in, and it organizes around your DNA and turns on and off your genetics, and that's proven, right? We've reprogrammed cells with light. We've regrown organs with light and genetics, you know? So that's what's going on, and you're in that dynamic, right? And the reason why you exist is because you're created for this purpose, and it's all coded in the religions. It's hard to decipher, but then when you do diligence on all of them, and then you find patterns of self-similarity, and then you listen to what the insiders are saying, and then you correlate the science fiction and the fantasy, it gives you this huge composite of what's actually happening on Earth and why, and it's all extrapolated everywhere. It's impossible not to see once you learn how to see it, because it's you. You're actually the whole, and you can develop a relationship with Creator where it will share its perspective with you. It'll show you through your own self, through your own inner work. And then that's what it's about. And right now, everybody's got to move towards more loving service, but there's a really dark, scary component everyone's got to face about the reality of where we're at, and why we've come up into being, and then what this biology we possess is, but then why doing what those Manus did, how they tried to hijack it for themselves, is wrong. And then the consequences of their actions and how they managed their fall, right? Because on their way down, they did a bunch of bad deeds, and they used the sacred knowledge and the ancient relics, right? So they took their position that was given to them by Ra through the delivering of the transcendental knowledge, and they used it for self-service. And then we're experiencing the karmic fallout of that as who we all are in the present moment right now. So that's where we're at. Anyways, I wanted to say that for you guys. It's literal, and this has to do with like raising your vibes. Everybody knows that, but it is like a really special time, and we all need to unite and stand up to this dark force that's on Earth, you know. And that's all the light people, all the good people have to get out and be that, and love and care about everybody, and try to help everybody, because this type of suffering and what's happening doesn't need to exist, because we have all our relations here. We have the benevolent beings from our religions are here. They're literal, spiritual, and technological. And they just can't reveal themselves without us doing the work. So we have to raise our vibe up and become a whole new humanity, right? And we do that through loving service. We do that by caring about one another. And we do that by being brave and standing up to darkness with the truth. And we try to help and enlighten others by being in service to them in any way we can. So that's why I made this video for everyone. I hope you guys liked it. Thanks. Love you. Bye-bye.